This is Words of Radiance with Dr. Troy Munson.
Hello and welcome, Dr. Troy Munson. Wouldn't it be nice if we just simply made up our mind and it was the right decision? And this particular podcast is changing your mind about your mind. And if we expand that for just a moment, our brain is technically not our mind. Now, for those of you that are of a spiritual bent, that may have some meaning to you. For those of you that maybe happen upon this and are like, I'm not sure what he just said. The brain itself is just a tool, and it's kind of a poor one at that, but it works, I guess it works well enough for our aspects or our stuff here in this physical world. But the brain itself is quite creative, but most of our creativity, most of our flashes of insight come when we're actually more silent, more still. And our brain is just a conglomerate of things that have happened to us, experiences that we've had, and we try to make decisions based on that, but yet every moment of every day is different. Even though they might look like similar surroundings, your responses will change. You may notice that you respond in this exact way 1,000 times before, and now this time, you don't. It's like I have a cat that he's not allowed in the kitchen, and he just keeps trying to get into the kitchen, even though he's 13 years old. And so my response to him as he's growing older is softening because we call him old bumpy, because he's losing weight and you can tell that he doesn't have a lot of muscle mass and you can feel every bone in his body, and yet he's still trotting along, but you can tell that it's a bit more painful to be petted. And so you tend to be a bit more forgiving than in the beginning when I would squirt him with a squirt gun because I'm like, look, I don't like to hit you, but you don't like water, so here you go, it's in your face, get out of the kitchen. So we do these things and we begin to change our mind about stuff, and we kind of can see it as inconsistency. And if we're inconsistent, that really actually means we're probably not living in reality, which maybe that's a concept I'll expand a little bit more on another podcast, but at least it gives you a one-time over here to kind of realize that, what do you mean about inconsistency? Well, is God inconsistent? Now, some of you might answer, well, yes, he is. Well, that might be your judgment on what you're seeing, but when you dig down deep to the bedrock layers of what God's trying to do, and you say, and you ask him, what are you really trying to do here? And he says, I'm trying to accomplish love and lead my child back to heaven, which is you, which is me, which is everyone. And so with that concept, we realize, okay, he is actually very consistent. He's not illogical. God, which is life, which is love, which is joy, which is peace, is amazing. And yet we're told that anything of spiritual ilk, the world will see it as nonsense. And yet what the world holds as important, God sees as nonsense. Hey, I really need to get to my job. I mean, God's like, what? Are you kidding? Why? Well, because if I don't, I won't have any money. And God rolls his eyes and says, really? Who did you think your provider is this whole time? You wanted to have a job so you could feel like you were doing your part and make money, which I still give all to you. I keep the job that you have for you. I'm the one that got it for you. I'm the one that's made every piece of food on the planet, every piece of metal that you trade for whatever, every piece of paper that has a dead president on it that you trade for other things. Who do you think made all that? Who do you think created all this? And yet we come across and think that we do all these things. And so I want to soften yet again another way of our thinking and our admiration or our amour or our just this gaga-ness over our own thinking. I just love my own thoughts. That is something that we should be really questioning more than anything. So this thinking mind of ours, so changing our mind about our mind becomes an important aspect of what we should be accomplishing each day. Now, ways that we can accomplish that. Well, let's say that you really want something, and I'm okay with you wanting something. I'm okay with me wanting something. I'm okay with anybody wanting something really bad. But let's take the flip side of this. Let's say that you're kind of irritated with somebody else, and they might even have what you want. And so you're thinking, oh, man, I cannot stand that person. And yet they have something I want, or maybe they also want what I want. And if there's anything that you want, you should be praying that somebody else gets what you want. And in such a way that, I love the Big Book. There's a minister that wrote a paragraph in there. I'm going to read it to you. If you have a resentment and you want to be free of it, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free, even if you really don't want it for them. And your prayers are only words, and you don't mean it. Go ahead and do it anyways. Now, this is something that I have noticed in myself having done this, but I'm going to read the rest of the paragraph here. Do it every day for 2 weeks, and you will find you have come to mean it and to want it for them. And you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you now feel compassionate understanding and love. And I am amazed that when I do this, there is like such resistance in the beginning. But anything that you want, anything that you feel like you should have in your life, want it for somebody that you don't like. And when you do that, watch the resistance in the beginning, but do it anyways. Even if it's by rote. If you have to write it down and read it, fine. But eventually, the more you do it each day, I guarantee within a very short period of time, you're actually going to feel it. And you're going to mean it. And then you're going to literally be free of that resentment towards that person. And that, my friend, is something we should all be striving for. And so changing your mind about your mind, I've given you numerous ideas of how to do that. This one is yet again another powerful one. And changing our mind about our mind, if for those that are of the advanced spiritual ideals that have been around the block, so to speak, a couple of times, this is yet something I've talked about before in the past, but if you've never heard it before, this is for you, and anybody can do this, but some people might find it tedious and tough. So be it. If you'll go in and just watch your thoughts, you'll find that most of the thinking you're doing is actually just image making. When you grab onto a thought, and I used this example earlier today with a group of individuals, let's say that you're going to make or run some errands. And so you look in your mind at every place you're going to go, an instant image appears. And your brain says, hey, we're going to stop at this place first because it's on the right side of the road. And then we're going to stop at this place first because it's on the right side of the road. Then we're going to cross over traffic once. We're going to go back home and then go to this place because it'll be on the left side technically of where we're starting from. And then it'll be on the correct side of the road that we don't have to go across traffic. And it will be the easiest journey that we have so that we can be as efficient as possible and get back and do the other things we have to do. And then your brain will start going off on things like, yes, and that'll be much safer for you, and it should be easy, and that's a better turn in, and we'll go at that light so that we don't have to do this, and it won't be dangerous, and we'll be safer. And it creates all of these little subtle nuances in this wonderful movie that created in your mind. And yet, it actually wasn't thinking at all. It was just image making. And it makes images almost always out of fear. And I tell you that because you're like, well, what's wrong with image making? There is nothing wrong with it if you want to stay in fear's grip. But if you're ideal and you really do want to change your mind about your mind, then one of the things that you're going to want to give up is fear. Fear runs most people in very weird ways. They're constantly doing things they don't want to do because they're doing it out of fear. They're constantly defending their positions. They are getting themselves into trouble mentally. They are feeling less than they should. So now they have to puff up their ego. So now they get upset and they get angry and they say mean things to people that they love. These are all things that the ego is constantly vying for a better position or a psychological or physical win over another. And I implore you to see through these shenanigans and want no part of them. Every time in the beginning when I began to let go of my ego, when it felt small, I counted it a victory. I would watch it and I'd be like, oh, poor little ego. You look so small and so sad. And of course, that was probably another layer of egoicness, if we want to call it that, or the fleshly mind, or what have you. But I didn't mind at the time. I got it, I knew it, it was okay. And eventually, I was disinterested in the ego. And then I could dissociate my true self, the one that is peace, the one that is love, the one that is led constantly, and is at total peace to be led all the time, and not think things like, look what I just did, how amazing I am. And it just simply did whatever Spirit led, Holy Spirit led, God led, Christ led, your real self led, the self that is you, the big S self, and not the tiny s self that's the ego. That part of you that is one with God forever and ever, that is trying to lead you back home, that isn't afraid of anything, that knows that you're never in danger, that, yes, it understands that bodies can attack bodies and bodies can go away, and we've labeled it death, but that life is eternal and you are one with that life and it never is going to end. And you're going to move on into a glorious way and let go of this small little container called a body, this limited form that seems so fearful, but it's only fearful to the brain. But when you go and move beyond the brain and the ego, all of a sudden the mind that is you, that is everything, that is infinite, steps in and starts really moving in some miraculous, creative, beautiful, loving, peaceful ways. That is what we're talking about. So those that have accepted Christ in the fullness of that word are there. But I know few who have done that. Most folks still live in the confines of the egoic mind. They're afraid constantly. They do weird things like go after medical procedures or wear seatbelts thinking it's going to save them, or they stay at home because they're too afraid to step outside. They're all body-orientated thinking. And what we're trying to do is to get you away from the flesh, crucify it daily, and now step into the bigness that is you, that is God, that has always been you, that He wants you to be, and He's leading you to, so that you can have a life that is really quite creative, amazing, joyful, completely loving, the most amazing experiences you could ever imagine, because you're not labeling them or judging them anymore. You're seeing them for what they are, and they are astounding. It is 10,000 times more amazing than your best thought you've ever had. The best movie you've ever run through your mind cannot compare, even in the least amount, to what you'll experience when you completely let go of your little fleshly brain. Let's just label it correctly. And when you step into that which is you. So I'm leading you there. I'm coaxing you there. I'm pointing you there. I have nothing special. I just figured this out, and I'm just pointing. I'm just kind of this big finger in the sky saying, this is the direction of light. And you turn around and away from darkness, away from these thoughts that are constantly fear-generated, and you look at the light one time clearly and you think, oh my gosh, that's where I need to go. And that's that simple word called repent, or simply turning. You've just turned from darkness to light. Now, will you turn back to darkness? Probably many times. Yes, I remember doing that myself. And I would even berate myself in the beginning, but I'll encourage you not to do that. Just simply ignore the thought that it told you that you were bad, and look, you did it again, and simply turn yet again. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And you find yourself taking steps towards the light, and you pick up somebody else that's turned the other way, and you say, hey, it's this way, my friend. Oh yeah, thanks. And they turn, and again, you're arm in arm walking towards the light. And eventually there are 7 point something billion of us all walking towards the light, and we're instantly there. A glorious day, indeed. And that day is today. Until next time, I'm Dr. Troy Munson.
Thank you for listening to Dr. Munson's Words of Radiance. We hope you enjoyed our show.